Jesus was not the Savior who fitted people's expectations. The religious leaders of his time started to get upset with him. They did not want to accept that he was the promised Messiah, the Son of God. They resented the fact that many people loved listening to Jesus rather than to them. They hated him for claiming to be the Son of God, for forgiving sins, only God could do that, and for healing people on the Sabbath, the sacred day of rest. Many times they tried to make Jesus say things that would get him into trouble, but he always saw the trap. At last, the religious leaders started to make plans to put Jesus to death and be done with him forever. Jesus knew that he would have to suffer and die to accomplish God's plans for providing forgiveness of sins. He told the disciples on several occasions that this was going to happen. One of his disciples, Judas, was disappointed with Jesus. This is what happened according to Luke 22, 3-6. Then Satan entered into Judas called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray to them in the absence of a crowd. Satan came back on the scene. He thought that when Jesus was killed, Satan would conquer him. But Satan didn't know the plan of God that would save the world through Jesus' death, and didn't realize that his actions were actually part of this plan. Another disciple, Peter, declared that he would stay with Jesus till the bitter end, but Jesus told him how he would react once Jesus would get arrested. Jesus said, "I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day, until you deny 3 times that you know me." Do you remember that the Israelite fathers in the time of Moses had to kill a lamb and smear its blood on the doorposts of their houses so their oldest son would be spared? This is called Passover meal. The Jews celebrate this Passover meal every year in remembrance of how God led them out of the country of Egypt towards the Promised Land. Jesus celebrated this meal with his disciples also, but he gave new meaning to it. Luke 22:19-20 says, "And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And likewise, the cup after they had eaten, saying, 'This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood.'" The broken bread refers to Jesus' body, which would be given in his sacrifice, and the wine refers to his blood, which would flow to bring atonement for sins. Jesus was going to be the Lamb who would give his life so that the lives of all who believe in him would be saved from eternal death. After the meal, Jesus and his disciples went to the Garden of Gethsemane, a quiet place where he often went. Judas had already left to tell the religious leaders where they could find him. Jesus knelt down to pray, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. This cup means all the suffering and death Jesus knew was going to be in store for him. He dreaded this cup that he had to drink, but the will of his Father was more important to him than anything else. Then a crowd led by Judas came to arrest Jesus. Judas walked up to Jesus to kiss him. Jesus said, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" It was normal for a disciple to greet his teacher with a kiss, but now it served to point Jesus out in the dark so he could be arrested. The chief priests, officers of the temple, and the elders took Jesus to the high priest's house. The soldier who held Jesus in custody mocked him and beat him. Meanwhile, Peter, who was ousted in the courtyard, was being asked 3 times if he was also a disciple of Jesus. 3 times Peter said he did not know Jesus. Then the rooster crowed, and Jesus looked straight at Peter. Luke 22:61-62 says, "And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times.' And he went out and wept bitterly." Jesus suffered betrayal and denial by some of his best friends in his darkest hours. He can identify with human suffering, but his suffering would go much deeper than any of us have ever experienced. The religious leaders started to interrogate Jesus. They were especially upset with him because he said he was the promised Savior. In their eyes, this was not true, so it was blasphemy, and Jesus should be put to death because of that. They asked, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. But because Israel was under the government of Rome, the elders could not execute capital punishment. They needed the consent of the Roman governor, who was named Pilate. Now they started to accuse Jesus of stirring up political unrest. But Pilate could find no guilt in him. This is what happened according to Luke 23, 18 through 25. But they all cried out together, "Away with this man, and release us to Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder." Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus. But they kept shouting, "Crucify! Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found him in no guilt deserving death, and I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. Pilate was afraid for his own position, so he gave in to the wish of the crowd. Jesus would be crucified, a horrible, cruel way of capital punishment reserved for bad criminals. The main points of this lesson: 1. Jesus was not accepted by religious leaders of his time. 2. He was betrayed by one of his disciples and disowned by another. 3. He instituted the Lord's Supper so we would remember that his death was to bring forgiveness of sins. 4. He was arrested and sentenced to a cruel death.